Our goal is to fight on behalf of these people and represent these people and make sure that they get the full measure of justice they can possibly get.
That's Christopher Adamson, partner at Adamson Ahdoot. He built his firm around a simple promise: show up for people and build a process that makes sure nothing gets missed from intake all the way to resolution.
We have 100+ employees at this point. We have the office segmented into different departments that take the case from beginning to end.
He's helped scale the operations behind a law firm, building a team and structure that can carry a case from the first call to the final resolution, with clear handoffs and a smoother client experience end to end.
My piece of advice would be working towards getting to that goal where you can be working on the business and not in the business.
Today, he breaks down what it actually takes to grow a firm and build the systems and leaders that can carry the work. By the end of this conversation, you'll learn how to think about scaling in stages, where to focus first, and how to build an operation that protects both the client experience and the team behind it. I'm Julien Emery, and this is the Scalable Law Blueprint. I guess from a business perspective, you started about 15 years ago at the new firm. I guess for some context, like where are you at now? How many people in the firm? Roughly what's the size of the firm? And then I'm curious to dig into that journey and the challenges along the way. Scaling a business and scaling a law firm specifically is difficult. But maybe for context, how many people at the firm now? How many cases roughly are you guys working with per month?
In terms of where we started and where we are now, like when we first started, it was literally just the two of us. Eventually, we hired like one assistant and it was the three of us. One thing that we wanted to do is we never really wanted to get too big for our britches in the sense of like hiring staff just to hire them and then maybe being overstaffed. We wanted our staff to grow consistently with the volume of files that we were handling. If anything, there were probably growing pain moments where we were understaffed because we were signing up a fair amount of cases, but we might have been a little bit short in terms of what we call case managers, who are really the people who are handling the files on a day-to-day basis. So their main responsibility is like contacting insurance companies and opening claims and making sure the client is seeing the right health providers and requesting medical records and bills and clearing liability and things like that. And so to give you some context in terms of from where we started to where we are now, I mean, we have 100+ employees at this point. We have the office segmented into different departments that take the case from beginning to end. So from the intake department, which is responsible for following up with prospective clients and signing them, all the way through what we call our disposition department, which is when the money gets dispersed, and then everything in between. And so what that really looks like is essentially like intake, pre-litigation, litigation, and then disposition. And so within all of those departments, we have 100+ employees at this point. Like we have some nearshore and offshore people as well, but we pay them through like third-party companies. So in terms of W-2 employees, I think at this point we're probably around like 110, maybe closer to 120 at this point. Like in terms of the amount of files that we're handling, like I can take a look in our pre-litigation folder and see that we have 2,700 open matters. So all of those are going to be in various stages. A hefty amount of those are actually Eaton Fire cases at this point as well, because we've gotten into the Eaton Fire cases. But just in terms of like open matters, we have 2,700 open matters. And then some of those matters they have multiple claimants, like multiple plaintiffs, right? So there might be within those 2,700 matters, many of those files are going to have multiple plaintiffs. And then on the litigation side of things, we have about 375 open matters. So 375 matters in litigation in various stages. So that's kind of gives you a sense of how many files that we're handling. In terms of the amount of files that we're signing up per month, it's probably anywhere, depending on the month, in between like 80 to 100 or something like that.
Looking across all firms in general, that's a good sized firm on the plaintiff side. What were the biggest growing pains along the way? What were the hard parts where there's a lot of firms that maybe are a couple partners and an assistant, and then they take on some cases and then they like kind of get afraid and they dial back, or maybe they keep hitting these plateaus. What growing pains did you see and how did you overcome those, either with, better people, systems, technology, processes? Just curious sort of stories from or lessons from that journey.
I think from a real brass tacks perspective, the initial growing pain was just learning the business. So we had to learn the business, but also how to practice law, right? Because like I had some experience in employment law, but not a ton in terms of civil litigation. Like I hadn't even taken a deposition. And then Alan had no experience practicing law, but he had experience running a business. So the initial growing pains were really just like learning personal injury law, which we kind of learned inside out just by doing everything. And but that also included, like, from a business sense, like getting cases. So we had to figure that out. In personal injury specifically, there's a lot of third party referral services where you can essentially buy leads and then get leads from these referral services. So for us in the beginning, that was kind of our main source of leads. And then we also, going back to like learning personal injury law, we had some mentors who had been in the business for a while who also gave us advice. But that was probably the initial hurdle, was just really learning personal injury law, learning how to practice law effectively, and learning the business of running a plaintiff side law firm that over time we just ended up becoming pretty much 100% personal injury. And so really like learning how to run a personal injury law firm, which a lot of this, like I'm sure as you know, running a business is kind of just school of hard knocks. Like you learn stuff on the fly. And so I think for us, we've always been very focused on the money that any of the money that we're making, we put it back into the business. So in terms of like another growing pain, it financially for sure, and just like any money that we were and it's not like in the beginning we're making money hand over fist, but the money we were making, we were putting it back into the business. And so Alan and I weren't taking really anything for ourselves. We were living very lean, and I'm talking about probably for like the first, I would say 10 years, but really, really for the first at least like 5 to 7, living really lean, putting everything back into the business. And the money that we were putting back into the business was going towards getting more cases, because we always felt like if we could just get more cases and kind of reach that critical mass of turning over cases and bringing more cases in, that was going to help us scale in terms of signing up more clients and also being able to hire more people. So that's really where any of the cash flow that we had went. It went into case acquisition and acquiring staff. In terms of another growing pain, I would say learning how to vet employees and learning how to hire slow and fire fast, as the saying goes, because one of the biggest lessons that we learned has to do with that one bad apple spoils a bunch. So somebody could be a superlative employee, but if they have a negative influence and cast a negative pall over the office with their attitude or how they're treating people, that's not good. One of the things that Alan and I always prided ourselves on is having a workplace where people enjoy coming to work and working with the people they work with. So of course there's going to be ups and downs that you have to deal with, because this is a service profession, right? And so you're dealing with clients, but not only that, like you're dealing with insurance adjusters, you're dealing with defense attorneys, and it is an adversarial profession. It can be, as well as being a service profession. So it can try you, but if you can at least show up to an environment where you enjoy the environment and the people you're working with, it makes the work that much easier. So again, learning to kind of hire slow and fire fast.
Do you guys hire, like, do you have your own recruiters to help with that, to help have a pipeline of people? What sort of systems are there on recruiting that helped you do that?
I think in terms of growing pains, that's something else that we learned going along. Something that I really had to learn as well is like learning to delegate and not do everything ourselves. Eventually, we did bring in an in-house talent acquisition person. Now we have somebody in-house who's like our in-house talent acquisition person, who that is her sole focus. And also bringing in like mid-level managers, department supervisors, and a director of operations, something that we had to learn, probably more so me versus Alan, because Alan already had experience running a business. But being able to focus working on the business and not in the business, because for a long time we were doing everything. Like, we're attorneys as well. We were actually handling our own caseload, and because now we have probably, like, including me and Alan, maybe like 14, 15 attorneys, but now we have like the attorneys can handle the files. Like, I'm not handling files anymore. Alan's not handling files. Every single prospective client, to talk to prospective clients, to like close clients, like that type of stuff. So now like our vision has to be broader in the sense of like, how can we continue to scale? How can we continue to grow revenue? How can we ensure that we're going to continue to generate leads and case acquisition? How is artificial intelligence going to potentially affect the firm in terms of how the firm operates, but also in terms of lead acquisition and things of that sort? So we really have to have more of a bird's eye view. And like I said, focus more so working on the business versus in the business.
Hey, have you noticed everyone's talking about AI, but no one's showing law firms how to actually use it? That's exactly what SuperPanel does. It's an AI system built for law firms, automating intake, follow-ups, and evidence gathering, so your team can focus on clients and not busy work. If you want to bring AI systems that do work for you into your firm, but you don't know where to start, scan the QR code or click the link in the show notes to see how it works. Now back to today's conversation. If there's another attorney listening to this who is doing too much themselves and is working in the business instead of on the business, I've found that there's generally, not just attorneys and all entrepreneurs, all founders, there's always this fear, because if I know how to do something really well and I see someone else not doing it the way I do it, you immediately want to stop that, right? And so I guess, how did you bridge that gap, and what advice would you give to someone else who is having a hard time letting go of that control and sort of preventing them from scale by not letting go of that control?
I think a lot of the lessons Alan and I learned, we learned kind of on the fly. So my piece of advice would be to understand that from the beginning, to know that that's your goal, and to be working towards getting to that goal where you can be working on the business and not in the business. And so for us, it kind of became a necessity because we got to the point where we realized how we were operating was unsustainable. Like, we can't keep handling all these files or doing all these things. We have to be able to have the infrastructure in place to delegate these things so we can focus on the business. Because at a certain point, like as a founder, that's probably where you're better suited anyway, is figuring out how to continue to scale the business and grow the business, grow revenue, get more clients, et cetera, versus working in the trenches on a day-to-day basis. And so I don't know if you follow that guy, Arthur Brooks. He's a Harvard professor, but he's written books on happiness. And that's his whole thing, is he studied happiness. I was listening to him on a podcast, and he was talking about how there's two different types of intelligence. And when you're younger, it's easier for you to pick things up and learn things. And when you're older, your intelligence is a little bit more crystallized. So it might be harder for you to like learn new skills, et cetera. Whereas you might have been handling a caseload and working on cases on a day-to-day basis. When you get to a certain point, you might transition from being a litigation attorney to a managing partner. And so I think this is kind of similar. It's like when you're a founder, you might have been working on cases and handling cases out of necessity because you had to. And you might have also been very good at it. But at a certain point, it might be time to transition to being like a quote unquote a managing partner, where you have the idea that you can't keep working on cases and running the business, because they're going to become like mutually exclusive. So like, I would tell somebody who's younger, or maybe in like their business is younger, they're not at the point where Alan and I are at. Even if you just started your practice and it's just you might be a solo practitioner, at least have the understanding that from here going to here, your goal is to get to here where you're working on the business versus in the business, but have that understanding and know that that's your endpoint. But I would at least like realize that that's where you're trying to get, or else if you don't realize that, you're not going to be building your business to get to that point. And then there might come a point where it's like you're burning out or you're hitting a wall and you don't know why. And it's because you don't have that endpoint in mind. So that would probably be like the piece of advice that I would give to even me. Like if I was going to go back and give a piece of advice, the younger Chris, I was first starting out with Alan in 2010. That's what I would tell him. And then I would also tell anybody who's starting a business that you have to be passionate about it. Like you have to have that passion, because that's what's going to sustain you through those times where you feel like you're hitting a brick wall. Like Alan and I always talk about how, like, when we first started out, and when I say first started, I'm probably talking about like the first 7 years, like at the end of every year, we would tell ourselves next year is our year. Next year is going to be our year. And then like it became a running joke because like next year was never the year because like we still felt like we were struggling and it's an uphill battle. When we going to make real money, et cetera. And it's like we would always say next year is going to be our year, and it never was until it was, right? And so, but we wouldn't have gotten to that year where things like really kind of like, but in order to get to that inflection point, you have to have the grit and the stick to itiveness, as people say, and the determination. And if you don't have the passion for what you're doing, you're not going to be able to sustain it. Like you're going to burn out because you're doing it for the wrong reasons. And so for us, we built our firm on, it was never about making money. It was about helping people. And that's another thing that a piece of advice that I'll give to anybody who's starting a business, especially a service business. Like I think Richard Branson has a quote about that. It's like any business is just like finding what people need and giving it to them or something like that. You have to come at your business from a service first mindset and really have a passion for what you're doing in order to really sustain you through the course of what you're doing. Because if your goal is just to make money, at the first sign of adversity, you're going to throw in the towel because you're not motivated by the right thing.
Yeah, it's so true. It never goes to plan, right? Like everyone has a plan till they get punched in the face.
Yeah.
That was Mike Tyson or something.
Mike Tyson, exactly.
Yeah. The legal industry is going through a lot of changes, right? What technology can do, what AI can do, where it's used. If you think of your own firm, like what are the things that you have changed? What's worked, what's not worked? And where do you see the next few years going? Like what are the most successful firms of 3-4 years from now doing differently than the most successful firms of today, do you think?
I think in any business, you have to be able to embrace technology. And I think it's even better if you can be an early adopter of technology. That's not to say that every technological trend that comes along is going to be sustainable or last in the long term. But I think having a mindset that you want to be an early adopter of technology is important. And Alan's even more about that than I am. Like Alan's very tech savvy. And so one of the things that we did fairly early on, and I'm talking about probably like in 2014 for us, so probably like 4 years in, 5 years in, is we went completely paperless at a time where like not everybody was going paper. Like people still had paper files, but for us, like we would look at physical files and be like, why does this even exist? So now we're 100% paperless. But that's something that like even something as simple as that, like being an early adopter of certain things, like we use Salesforce as our case management software. And Alan really, he kind of built it out himself with Salesforce at a time. Because now there's other companies that exist specifically in the legal industry that are built on the Salesforce platform. But at the time that we did it and Alan did it, those companies didn't even exist. So like he built a very bespoke Salesforce platform for our business via embracing technology and then also embracing other things like at a time where a lot of people still had desk phones, like we were switching to soft phones and voice over IP and stuff like that. So I think any technology you can embrace that's going to make you more efficient and effective is something that you have to have an eye towards. And so, of course, like the easiest thing to point to right now is AI, right? And like figuring out how you can integrate AI into your own business, whether you're a law firm or any other business. How can you incorporate AI, not be scared of it, and incorporate it in your business in a way that also makes you more effective and efficient? I think the unavoidable hard truth is that it's probably going to eliminate certain jobs because it's going to create redundancies and you're probably going to need less people. But at the same time, from a business perspective and a service first perspective, we always have to be providing the best possible service to the client, always has to be front of mind. And if there's ways for us to use AI to be able to do that, that's something that we have to look towards and embrace, whether it's legal research or drafting documents or any other use that you can find for it. That's something that we have to explore. So like for our firm or any other firm out there, I would advise identify the gaps in the system that you have. Like if you were to look at your office holistically and see where things aren't running smoothly, we have a bunch of different departments. And so there can be times that there might be bottlenecks in between departments in terms of a case going from intake to pre-litigation or pre-litigation to litigation. Is there some sort of bottleneck in the chain. Why is it happening? And what can we do to alleviate it? Oftentimes, there's some sort of automation that can exist that can help alleviate that bottleneck. So how can you automate your business in ways that make it more efficient? This goes back to like working on the business versus in the business, looking at it from a bird's eye view and really identifying gaps in the system and how you might be able to plug those gaps with the use of technology, with AI, with some sort of automation. Because at the end of the day, you want to make sure you're providing like as seamless of an experience as you possibly can for the client, especially in our industry, because again, these are people who are going through something oftentimes through no fault of their own. And now they're thrust into this situation where it's like, I didn't want to be here. I'm here through no fault of my own. I'm signing up with this attorney's office that I probably don't even know. I might have found them via Google, or now people are using the like Chat GPT for search, or Perplexity. So I might have found them through some sort of search. They seem like they have good reviews. I don't know them personally, and I'm putting my trust in them to advocate for me, to represent for me as best they possibly can, to put my interests first. And so it's incumbent upon us as the attorney or any other plaintiff attorney office to do right by the client and provide the highest possible service.
How do you think about that end to end? Because it sounds like you're essentially designing a customer experience, right? You're designing a customer journey from first touch point all the way through to settlement disbursement. How do you navigate the sea of vendors in all the different options? Because there's software tools, there's outsourcing tools, there's outsourcing plus software. How do you navigate all the, just seems like an explosion of different solutions.
Alan's really good at that, honestly, because he's so tech savvy. And also with being in business for 15 years at this point, in some ways, I won't say that we've seen it all, but we've seen a lot because of the amount of experience that we have in the industry. We've tried a lot of different services. We've tried a lot of different vendors, and even that alone allows us to call some of the people who might just, it might be like a cold call or a cold email and be like, oh, we're offering this service. And at the point we are now, we can kind of sniff out what smells right and what doesn't. Or if we meet with someone or have a call with someone, we can kind of sniff out what feels right and what doesn't. You know, other plaintiff PI attorneys, some of whom might be like younger than us or just starting out or whatever, like if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So somebody's like, oh, I can get you like X amount of qualified leads that you're going to love per month at this price point. Like if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And it might, like, let's say they might be able to do it for a month, but then can they do it for 2 months, 3 months, whatever? Or somebody's like, I can get you a whole bunch of leads. They might be leads that a bunch of other attorneys have already turned down and now they're recycling them to you. Or it might be like, oh, I can get you a bunch of leads per month. All you have to do is pay me $50K up front. Like, so if they're asking for like a bunch of money up front, or if they're not allowing you to do some sort of trial to see how the service is going to work or something like that. There's different things that as your business goes along and as you go along in your founder career or business operator career, you'll experience what sounds too good to be true, if something makes sense to you based on your past experience, et cetera. And so if somebody is like younger or just starting out, I would still just advise them to have like a critical eye and a critically thinking eye of like, okay, does this sound right? And just ask a ton of questions, right? Because like any question you have, if somebody's coming to you and they want to sell you a service, any question you have, they should be able to give you an answer or like go find the answer and bring it back to you. And so like you should be 100% satisfied via your inquiries with the answers that you're getting. And if not, that should be a red flag. Like, oh, I had this particular question. They couldn't answer and they couldn't even like really articulate how to get the answer. Like that's a red flag.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How do you think about, again, just with AI, and there's obviously like multiple stages in the process, but especially when you get into the execution of the work and the, demand drafting, whatever it might be, obviously there's a lot of support, there's a lot of ways that can help there. I guess, how far do you think that goes, like from full automation versus like your team, your people kind of overseeing that? Are AI systems going to completely run end-to-end cases autonomously, or like, are there just no lawyers, or like, where do you see that play out? How do you think about that?
I don't necessarily see that playing out in terms of no lawyers, because then Because remember, it's not just plaintiff attorneys on one side, it's defense attorneys on another side. So if you're going to say that there's going to be no attorneys, like you're talking about defense attorneys too, and it's going to wipe out an entire industry. So like insurance companies, defense attorneys, like they still have an incentive to keep their jobs around because defense attorneys want to bill insurance companies for their work. And then us as plaintiff attorneys, like we want to represent people. And I don't know that there's ever going to be like a world or a system where you can have no attorneys, because I still think you're going to need like a human attorney to have the touch point with the client, to be able to oversee the case, to litigate the case if necessary, because we still have to file lawsuits and litigate claims, and we still have to try cases in front of juries and human people. And so I don't necessarily think that system, like writ large, is ever going to completely go away. A lot of the stuff that happens in here is probably going to require less human capital. And so even if you have AI that's doing a whole bunch of things like helping with your demand drafting or helping with law in motion or something like that, there will still have to be a person who oversees that, so to speak, or is in charge of that process. But it might just turn out that whereas you required a staff of like 200 people, you might require a staff that's like a tenth as large. The AI is doing so much that it requires less human capital to do all the things that AI is now doing. And now you just need people to kind of oversee that and look over the things that AI is doing, right? And so I also think a lot of this from an individual firm perspective, just it depends on how efficiently and effectively these law firms are going to integrate AI. But I do think if you fail to integrate it, your firm will probably go the way of the dodo, because everybody else is going to use AI and you're going to get left in the dust. So it is going to be in everybody's best interest to figure out how to use it most effectively. I just think like from a broader perspective, that's just the nature of the world that we're living in 2025, going into 2026. Like every industry has to prepare for AI to really upend their industry and what the fallout of that is going to be.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And ultimately, it's like how to design the best customer experience in the most efficient way.
And I think like people are still going to value human contact and human ingenuity, and just from a broader perspective, like human creativity. Like even Neil deGrasse Tyson was saying something about how like the thing about science is that like in his mind, like with science, like everything can be proven. Like there is no mystery or no surprise, versus in the arts are made by humans having human experiences. So you can't predict like a painting or a poem, or like those are all based on the human experience that I'm having. And then I write a poem or paint a picture or take a photograph or something like that. So the reason why the arts are so important is because they allow for the creativity of human expression.
If you think about, legal work, right? Like there is a lot of sort of looking for that additional angle or looking for that creative angle and that ingenuity in the work, which I imagine you don't want to completely remove, but sort of how do you support that?
Especially something like trying cases. That's all like human ingenuity and creativity and standing in front of people and making an argument and connecting with them. So that's something that I don't think is ever going to go away, because I don't see like the civil justice system or the criminal justice system going away, even with the advent of AI. And so that in our profession, I would say that's probably like the peak of human creativity, ingenuity, expression, is trying a case in front of a group of 12 jurors of somebody's peers.
Well, Christopher, I really appreciate it. I could talk to you for hours about this stuff.
We just have to do a part two.
We can wrap it up, and we can do a part two. We can grab a beer or whatever it is. But this is
all
great.
Right, thank you.
Thanks for checking out the Scalable Law Blueprint. If today's conversation helped you think differently about how your law firm runs, share this episode with a colleague, and don't forget to follow the show so you never miss what's next. To see how automation can transform your intake and operations, visit superpanel.io and discover how leading plaintiff firms scale with confidence. I'm Julien Emery, and I'll see you in the next episode.